Hello. Hey, let me come back, y'all. Good afternoon, good evening if you're over in the UK. Before we get started and tell everyone who we have here on the panel, but we're going to talk about representation in tabletop and why it's important to all of us, hopefully to all of you that are here listening. But thank you to Gayming Live for having us. Today's programming is presented by Ally in the Community Zone. Is sponsored by Devolver Digital. Go play Cult of the Lamb. I said it. We've all been playing it. Go play it. Thank you to both of them for making this happen. And yeah, we're going to get on with it because we've only got 45 minutes and we all love to talk. So I'm going to start in the order on the stream because I'm at the bottom right. DM JazzyHands, who are you and why is this important to you so we can have something to kick off with?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Eugenio Vargas. I'm DM JazzyHands online. I use he, him pronouns. And one of the things that you said to us, Tanya, when we were sort of preparing for the panel is that we're not doing the LGBTQIA Rep 101 today. And I think that's important. And that's what I'm excited about today is I think many, if not all of us have done the 101 ad nauseum. People understand that yes, things should be representative of diverse communities, right? But then what does that really mean? How do you put your money where your mouth is? And why do so many of us tell you that it's important? For me, it's important because every single time I find myself a part of my identity represented in a piece of media that I haven't seen before, it is, I can't fully verbalize what that is like, because generally these are parts of my identity that I don't see represented in places, and there really is a connection that's hard to explain, but it does make me feel like a full person when I'm interacting with this media. So just really sort of talking about why and not just what today I'm excited for.
Excellent. Luke.
Hi, my name is Luke. I'm an non-binary person. I use the pronouns, and I can't really follow that without doing it. That's so good. Like, I don't really know how to go from that. Like, see they make you feel like a whole person. I was like, oh, that struck a chord. I don't know how that feels, because when you do get that representation that you don't see very regular, it hit you like, oh, this feels nice. This is nice. More people should feel like this.
Yeah.
Yes, and you just recently started playing tabletop, correct?
So I just started D&D or TTRPGs before the pandemic, and I'm now finally getting back into them, and I am very, very excited. Very excited.
Yay. And last but never least, Brian.
Hi. Sorry. Wow. Immediately throat. I'm Brian, also known as UrbanBohemian. My pronouns are he, they. And it's really hard to follow Eugenio ever. I specifically try to talk over him unless I have nothing to say. And
is that why?
Yes, that's why. That's why you think it's respectful. I'm like, no, got nothing. But like in addition to seeing yourself represented in any kind of TTRPG fictional universe, it also makes you feel as though the character you create that's like yourself will also be supported by that universe. So, it's okay if the rules let you make a queer character, but if every other piece of the text basically says this is still to borrow from X-Men, a world that hates and fears you, I'm not about that. So often knowing that characters are canon characters, queer, in that universe is like, okay, this is a place where I can also belong.
Yeah, and for me, hi, Tanya, she, her pronouns, CypherofTyr. I'm on Rivals Waterdeep with Brian and Eugenio, and we get to have many shenanigans. And for me, I wanted to do this panel and host it because, like everyone has said, we don't get that representation by default. We, especially in tabletop, we have to go in and make our characters very queer. We have to make our settings very queer. The game that won this year at the Gayming Awards, that is probably the gayest intentionally written RPG that I've ever played or read. I was lucky to have both of them, both Brian and Eugenio, in our charity stream. And even now, as long as some of us have been playing or reading or writing and working on RPGs, queer as default is not a thing except for Blue Rose. That's the only one I can think of by Green Ronin, where the setting is intentionally queer and being straight.
Like thirsty sword lesbians might also be a default queer.
I just like saying the name of that game, honestly.
I do. But the point remains, right? That's two. Okay.
You lasted a whole 10 minutes before saying it, though, so I'm proud of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And by the way, just so you all know, Brian and Eugenio play a canon couple on Rivals of Waterdeep. This is what our week is like every Sunday. So imagine Luke is a different cast member, and we're just sitting here going, just keep going.
To be fair, there was a season that we co-DM'd, which honestly was even worse. So, there's...
Also, something tells me Luke could keep up just fine.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I think I would struggle at first, but I would love to try.
I don't know. I don't think you would struggle. Not with this group. But I'm thinking about that, and again, we're not doing the 101. We exist in RPGs, etc. Both Brian and Eugenio play a canon queer couple, and then Luke, you said you've come back to tabletop with the pandemic happening. For all of you, what have you done personally to kind of, make your games as gay as possible? And, and have you ever had someone else outside of either the game or, in the case of Rivals, watching the show, have that tell you how important it is to see that representation?
I can start. I've been working on a couple of different new tabletop role-playing games that have not been published yet. And one in particular that I'm thinking about, I had to write basically a faction of people. So there was a ton of, obviously a bunch of lore, but also a ton of NPCs to write. And it was my first priority, right, was to make sure that they were a gender diverse set of NPCs. But then also, and this is, right, like that's the like, I don't know, maybe that's 103, right? Just like having queer people exist. But then I took a couple of them, and I think this is like the level up that I am hoping for to see more of. And I made their queerness like both part of their story, but also sort of, I don't know, important but unremarkable, right? It isn't that this NPC was a non-binary person. It was that their experiences as a non-binary person have informed their storyline that I wrote for them, right? And so seeing that sort of integration, both of like identity and the experience to back it up, and then also making them important, making them main characters, right? We've been seeing, sorry, something is in my eye. We've been seeing queer characters, we've been seeing gender diverse characters, NPCs in D&D, right? Let's talk about the big elephant in the room, right? In Wizards of the Coast products. We've seen non-binary people, we've seen queer couples, we've seen all of that. But what I now want, right, is those couples to be super central to the story, and for it not to be the you know, bring out your dead queers trope, but to have them be central and be fully realized people. So that's what I try and do, right? Is just to have a bunch of different folks represented and have it matter. And it's hard. Keep talking, I guess.
No, I don't. Yeah,
I was going to call on somebody.
No, I mean, I'm not involved in writing RPGs yet, but I think for me, just it's every character that I bring to the table has some element of queer identity, generally shared with me, or you know, if I'm trying to step into the role of somebody else, like you know, using a queer lived experience versus not. I think that for me now is the default of almost any character I create. And you know, I think like with my main one shot character, like sometimes I weave stereotypes in, sometimes I don't, and I just make them over the top. But there's always just knowing like, well, they're queer. It reminds me of when you and I started playing Kent and Virgil in Rivals of Waterdeep, and I think it was a good 15-20 minutes after our characters had started talking that somebody in the live Twitch chat said, "Wait, are they a couple?" And it sort of started kind of filtering back and forth between people, and Eugenio and I are laughing behind the scenes because we're like, how is it not obvious? How is it not like so obvious? But I think honestly, just you know, choosing to play in settings that have already been vetted and support that kind of diversity and that kind of queerness in their world building, and then playing characters that are just as queer as I want to be without worrying about, you know, the reactions of other people around the table, the reactions to the GM, and the reactions of people watching.
Yeah, Luke, what about you?
I think I've been very fortunate in this regard that I've exclusively started playing D&D and being surrounded by people who play D&D who are queer. And I think so I've got a very different perspective, like initially, but everyone I've played in, being queer is the default. Like my characters, I'm a queer person. I've played across the gender spectrum, as I'm sure most people have when they start playing D&D, just to explore a little bit. But I do remember specifically a conversation because we had a couple of straight guys playing with us at one point, and they tried to have not I don't think it was malicious, but we're having like a queer conversation, and they tried to do the whole shock thing, and I was like, no, hold on, and like pause the game. It's like, no, listen, it was a queer DM. There's only the bulk of everyone who's queer. We're not doing that. And I think just being able to stop and have that conversation, be like, no, listen, this is queer. This is what's happening. Like, and I think I'm really fortunate to be surrounded by the people that I'm surrounded by, so that I can just very comfortably and like have those conversations. And I think all three of you do a wonderful job of helping people like me with that.
I love that so much because it is about, right, there's the not remarkable thing that I mentioned again. Am I cutting in and out? I see my camera's doing weird things. Okay, great. That's the non-remarkable that I was talking about, right? And I love that story. I'm so glad you told that story. That's so great because that's the goal, right? Is not only to see ourselves and to be able to be as stereotypical or not or whatever, right? As we authentically are as queer people, but then to have it, to be comfortable doing it, right? In the game, and for it to not break immersion or like whatever, right? That's the next step, right? Now we exist. Now let's exist naturally, comfortably, confidently. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, that's why I made Celise gay. But I also realized, literally sitting on a panel with some of our friends at a PAX Unplugged, that I had done the bury your gays thing because her wife had been killed in front of her.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
And it was one of these of like, I now feel even worse about this because a lot of her plot hook revolved around getting revenge for that. But also, I had this moment of, nobody brought this up to me in 8 seasons. But it was interesting though, because, you know, I'm bi, I'm very out, but I'm not in a relationship with a femme-bodied person at this point. And so I also have to, I think a lot of it for me in making Celise was, this is what I don't get to live currently, but also kind of thinking about, yes, I've had girlfriends, but I don't have one right now. But I also did the bad thing of literally killing off my wife. So I've been trying to now rectify that.
It's interesting because I mean, I've thought about that with Celise, but I also, I also think something about this is when we make our queer characters, not necessarily giving them, even though our own backstories, our own personal backstories may be filled with some nonsense, but not giving our queer characters that default tragic backstory trope. And, you know, for Celise, it works because that gives her drive to move forward. And yeah, now she got a girlfriend and we're all very flummoxed and not sure how to handle this pairing. But I think that's another thing is like it even beyond, because it's a standard TTRP trope to like, well, my character has a tragic backstory. And I'm like, yeah, but if your character is queer, been there, done that. So like, let's not do that at the table.
Yeah.
Well, conversely, Fen, the character I play on Black Dice, she loves her parents. She left to protect her parents. And while her girlfriend did not die, she sacrificed her own happiness to keep her girlfriend safe and to break her from the hold of a Dark Lord. We play Ravenloft as Dark if you like dark and evil.
I was gonna say, to clarify, that is in a horror and dark campaign.
Yes. Very quickly, my character was with a canon character from the Ravenloft campaign, and she was beholden to a Dark Lord, and my character basically sacrificed their happiness to break her free of this Dark Lord, and now they're kind of dealing with that. But my character, I think, is the most queer one on the show, so it's weird to be on Rivals and then be on Black Dice when my character is like the only like really like, hey, how you doing? Like, this is my girlfriend. Oh, my characters have way more confidence than I will ever have.
I'm glad you brought up Celise and Fen, but I'm glad you brought up Celise because these were not characters that I have played in games, but as I was writing stuff, particularly in the game that I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of times where I would write whole things and then go back and read them again and be like, oh, could I have been tropier? Could I have written this more like a straight man? Right? And I think all right. Okay. No one's gonna confuse me for a straight man, but like I can write like one apparently. So my point is, right, like we as queer people have existed in this paradigm of media, right, where we are not very represented, and when we are represented in a particular way, and the four of us are all very conversant in discussing the ways that the representation that exists is problematic and what we want more out of it. But we are also, and I'm saying this because it was really difficult for me to get through. And if anybody out there is listening and working on this too, like, I want you to know it's okay. Like, it's okay for us to screw up. It's okay for us to write tropey, because we then have the tools to recognize it, right? So it's okay for that to happen. It has been normalized. It has been ingrained in us, the way that queer folks are represented on screen or in media, the way that we identify them as queer, right? So it's okay when you fall into that stuff. What I'm excited about is that then the more this is discussed in the community, the more resources you're going to have, the more people you can go to, the more folks can see the drafts of this stuff and point it out to you, so that we can all sort of see, oh, yes, even I, the queer Mexican, the gay Mexican, is like very capable of writing some tropey shit, right? And that's okay. I'm learning and improving, and that's exciting to me.
I think it's fair that, like, if that's all the media that you've consumed all your days, that's kind of what you expect, though. It's kind of hard to break out of those boundaries that you've been kind of put in all your days. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, if you look back to like He-Man, for example, you've got Skeletor, like you're very, very queer coded icon, but like, I think it's hard just to kind of break out. So I think it's easy to fall into those if that's all you've known.
And I think the benefit is that, because if you recognize that and you realize, oh wait, that's what I've done, then you have the power to change the direction of your character. Change whether you're just around a table with your friends, whether you're on an actual streamed show. You can basically say, okay, yeah, I know I've been doing this, but how about we introduce an event that lets me change this one facet, or change this direction, or change even a background element of my character, so that I can take their personality in a new direction away from these. Stereotypes aren't a bad thing. Tropes aren't always a bad thing, but you can realize, wow, I have just fallen into a well of all of them.
Do you ever feel pressured? Oh, apologize.
Oh, no, go ahead, Luke.
Do you ever feel like you're supposed to kind of big up the queerness in your character, or a little bit? I was curious.
Yeah. Because for me, it's about like, I, as the queer character, just like exist, right? Like and that's what we've been talking about. But there is a part of me that's like, okay, but if nobody recognizes me as queer, then it's not an impactful, right? Which of course, like, sucks, and that's a terrible state of being and not a great way to exist. But like, yes, absolutely, I do. And that's where I think Brian's point about not all tropes and stereotypes necessarily being bad, it's how we use them, how often we use them, the density with which we use them. So, yes, I absolutely do feel that.
Yeah, because I think I've leaned into that a little bit with Fen, where even though it's a horror game, when we've had the time to do so, I know we're not front page, but we should be PG-13. Fen has been out here living her best dark in the mist hoeing life. Cause her and oh my god, I lost her name because she's a canon character. The one who wields Nepenthe.
Nefel, no. Oh my god, Isolde.
Thank you.
Nerds. Oh my gosh.
Have you, Brian? How long have you known me?
Okay.
How long have you known me?
Eugenio pulling that from the literal mists into this day. Okay.
I'm sorry. Eugenio is walking lower, especially when it comes to certain things. Let's not forget when we became mass lords.
Oh my god, I cried immediately. Was just weeping.
No, that's okay. But like, that's why I kind of like leaned into that when I could, where Fen was living her best whole life, and there were times like, oh, I have an arrangement with my girlfriend. What you doing later? Which is not me, IRL, not for lack of trying, but it's not me. Look, it's been a long 3 years, and I've just now started traveling. So I find that interesting because, like I'm not hiding who I am, but as we know, if you're bi and someone sees you with an opposite gender person, they make assumptions. So I think when I'm in character on these shows, I kind of I ramp it up a little bit, a lot.
Yeah, well, and I feel like sometimes you have to, because even if everyone at the table is supporting or an ally, it doesn't necessarily mean that the storyteller or the other characters are going to bring any queer elements into the story on their own. And sometimes your character just has to be the one to do that, even if your queerness is just ordinary and boring, and it just means that, you know, if you go somewhere and they're offering you up, like, you know, a daughter as an offering, you're like, actually, where's your son? Like that, just even in that moment, like, it's just like, yeah, that's it. That's all it has to be. And as long as everybody around the table supporting it, like, you know, and because I also get a little hesitant when I know that people who are like cisgender heterosexual people are saying, well, I think I'm going to make this character queer. And I'm like, okay.
The whole table's like,
like,
Tell me more
okay,
first.
because yeah, like I now know what popular culture, you know, I know where queerness is in popular culture, and I know that for a lot of people, that's all they have to grab from. Even for queer people, if it's all we have to grab from, like, okay. So yeah, that's where I get a little bit hesitant, where I'm just like, maybe let's talk about what you want to do first, and maybe not do that, because I'm not sure you have the range.
Well, let's talk about that, because I mean, all of us, I'm sure, have seen these conversations, have seen or heard, or unfortunately been part of on Twitter and other spaces, the, oh my God, I want to be such a good ally. I want to play, or under the guise of playing with gender or discovering themselves. And we know these people are straight as straight can be. They decide for whatever reason, well, I want to be queer this time. And then you just sit there and you're like, the Lord is testing me. Because then you see the character that they've written. And this is also, I mean, a lot of us, I think, are people using safety tools. So there weren't session zeros, there weren't things that you just got what you got when you got to the table.
Oof.
So that is one place where it's like, you get the desire to try and be, I guess, helpful. I don't know, that's being generous. I have not yet imbibed anything. I'm waiting till after this panel. But I can't think of a better word than someone trying their best to show they're supportive and doing it in the worst way. So have you experienced that? Have you, or even before you knew that you were queer, have you done a similar thing?
I always want to know, like, I want to drill down with that person about why, right? What is it that, do they just want to be queer because they want to be an ally and inclusive and you know, whatever? Okay, that's great. I believe you that you are cool and an ally and inclusive. You have to play a queer character. And if there are other reasons, great, let's talk about that, right? But a lot of times, I don't think necessarily that the person has all the way thought it through. Maybe they have. Maybe I'm not giving credit, but that's what you find out in the conversation about, like, okay, cool. What are you trying to go for with this queer character? I don't, you know, I think we all had a pretty instinctual reaction when you posed the question, Tanya. Right?
I was like,
yeah, we all were. Well,
I mean,
but I don't want to discount what playing outside of your gender, sexuality, whatever can do in terms of understanding yourself. I don't want to discount that, right? I think all four of us know folks who have discovered important things about their own identity, their own sexuality, their own whatever it is through tabletop role-playing games or through games in general. So I don't want to discount that. I don't want to discourage that. But if that isn't sort of maybe the direction that it's going, I think it's just important that you think about why, right? I would say the same thing if somebody wanted to play, if somebody wanted to play outside of their race. Why? What are you trying to either learn or experience or go for in this? And hopefully there are people representative of that community that they're trying to play in, whether it's you know, a different gender, a different sexuality, that can, and they are willing to listen to that person's let's call it feedback.
I think kind of going on from that, I think a lot of people, especially like in video games, for example, custom characters, people make opposite gender characters all the time, and I think in D&D, get fair play, like fire and do it. But if you're gonna make your character queer, let it happen organically. Maybe not have that like straight off the bat, like, oh, I want to do this because X, Y, and Z. I'm like, is that what you want though?
It's really smart.
Yeah, I mean, actually, honestly, like, that's an amazing point. Like, to create a character, and if you're doing it to explore, then you can make their journey towards who they are a little more natural than all in right there as well. And yeah, I mean, I played live action Vampire the Masquerade, which White Wolf, even from the start, without being explicitly queer, was extraordinarily queer. And I was playing a live action role group with a bunch of theater people. So a lot of them were putting on, like, they were trying different kinds of identities, lots of horrible accents, but also a lot of them were, you hang your nose, okay? Like, but also like they were exploring with characters of different sexualities. And in some cases they were doing it like they were doing it like a performer would put on a role. But in more cases than not, because this was like college age and a theater group, a lot of them were basically trying to they were trying to push at those borders and their own inset boundaries and be like, actually, maybe this is a little bit more who I am. So yeah, it's good to be able to do that, but it's also the kind of conversation that you want to have primarily with your GM and the people who are going to be playing with you, because it's not the kind of thing that you should surprise a table with, or you know, especially if there are people of that identity, and then if there are people of that, then they're going to be sitting around going, what are you doing? Stop that, just please.
That's another reason go ahead, Tanya, please.
Okay, I just wanted to ask Luke, because, you know, the three of us are here in the US and, you know, you're over in Scotland. And I was wondering, you know, because my one visit to Scotland, it didn't feel like I could find much like RPG stuff, many people in the TTRPG. So I was wondering, like, for you, you said you're lucky enough to be surrounded by other queer people. Are they folks you found, like, where you live, mainly online? And also, how's it been, like, trying to just have a really gay game? Because except for Rivals, I don't think any of my any game I'm in is like super queer by default.
So I started playing D&D with queer people who got me into it. Like my friends here at Glasgow's full of homosexuals, riddled with them, and I was really lucky to play with queer people. And then I actually did a Pride show not long after I started playing D&D. I was very nervous, and I'm like, I barely ever grasped the rules. But
that's okay.
You don't need them. You don't need them.
I still don't to this day, for the record. But there was me. There was five other queer people of all sorts of like minorities, etc. And there was like maybe 30 people in this like old bunker warehouse thing. Don't know what it was, but it was lovely. It was really nice. But I think it's so much easier to do online, especially I'm sure a lot of people have learned over the pandemic. Like Discord is an incredible tool. Like it's very, very handy, especially for people who are not in Scotland. Because we've recently started a new D&D game with my Twitch community, and there are 2 people in Canada, and it's great. Honestly, it's really, really good.
Awesome. I guess, you know, I know we're not doing 101 or anything, but pie in the sky, if you could, let's say if any of us could buy WotC tomorrow, buy D&D or any franchise we like. Actually, before we do that, because that's a pie in the sky rapid fire question, we didn't talk about Motherland, Eugenio, because we've been very intentional about not gendering things, not being like straight, like we don't really have words even for orientation, and we've not really talked about that. So
yeah, I'm interested to see how that shapes up. Right now, I mean, we have a lot of the writing for the Into the Motherlands book. Real quick, if you're not familiar, it's a new sci-fi TTRPG rule system and setting that Tanya and Brian and I have all worked on. And yeah, we haven't put a whole lot of, like you said, like we haven't used those words much. And I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited for the idea of being able to create a setting where it just isn't, again, like it's all unremarkable. What I am sort of looking forward to doing though with that, because I think this is the like 201, right? Is not just making it unremarkable, but then going back in and finding places where we can not just by not talking about to make it unremarkable, but include it in the stories in ways, right? So it isn't that we define homo, hetero, bi, poly, sexual. It's not that we have all those defined in the text. It's that sometimes we make reference to a polycule, right? And it's referenced once and maybe is completely not all that important to whatever the lore is that we're discussing, but it's there, right? So we are pointing out without doing it overtly, we are pointing out that in fact this is an unremarkable piece of our setting, right? Or maybe so for example, we talk about actually, and we've done this. I say we haven't done this, but it's not true. We have done this because, as I recall, some of our android individuals are called Mansagene, and some of the Mansagene lore includes that it takes more than two, that often more than two Mansagene will get together in romantic relationships, and that ultimately, this is a little in the weeds here, but like that ultimately their reproduction is the combining of more than two Mansagene and their programming and their parts, and that's just is what it is. And so we've pointed at that being a natural, unremarkable, normal part of our story. It's included, so people know that we're not just not mentioning it because it doesn't exist. And I don't know, starting in a whole blank, fresh star system is really exciting for stuff like that because we get to set the tone. And I think that setting the tone is not just making it unremarkable, but making it aggressively, actively, presently unremarkable.
Yeah, because shout out to Michael Kritz, who just threw that in there. I don't know if he discussed it with you at all, but it was just like, just offhand, oh, this is my polycule, now back to what we're doing. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And also, Michael decided to play their characters non-binary and was very respectful about it and made sure everyone was okay with it. And, checked in not just with us, but with other people. And that's the kind of thing when we talk about if you want to play a queer character, you want to play outside your race, those are the things in which, you have to think about. You have to really consider, why am I doing this? Because Eugenio's been on panels with me where this has happened, where we get I want to play, and they list like every axis of marginalization all in one person. Is that okay? And I'm like, I don't know, is it? I'm not at your table. Like, why are you asking permission? But my pie in the sky question before we open it up to a few questions, if you suddenly had the money in your bank account to buy any franchise of tabletop or make your own game, how gay would you make it?
See, when you said, I feel bad that Eugenio just said so much, because when you said if you could buy WotC, I was like, okay, I just want to hear his answer first. Like,
Well,
I just want to hear his answer first.
I mean, he could go first if you want.
I mean, like, vary, but I think what I would so vary, right, is the truth. But what I would do is I would take a bunch of upcoming projects, right, and I would actively make all of the like lead NPC protagonists queer, right, and that would be like phase 1. Just to make some main characters that aren't your PCs, because obviously that's up to you, but some main characters queer. And then phase 2 would be, I would write some adventures where, because this is something that we haven't talked about, but like when we're talking about sexuality, that takes a very specific set of game events to even be relevant, right? Which is another, like, why do you want to play a gay character? Is it so that you can like be extra? Because that you can do without playing a gay character, right? Is it because you want to have a same gender partner in the story? Okay, well then, yeah, you should probably play a gay character, right? So I would write stories that interact with queer romance, right? And queer sex. And that would be phase 2, right? So now we have main characters that are queer, and that's normal, and we're used to it. Now we have stories of romance and sex, and they also involve queer folks. And then we're trying to make that normal. And then once all of that is in there, we're going to have gotten rid of the awful grognards that we don't want around anyway. And we're going to have shown in a couple of different ways how our identities can be normalized in this game without it being all-encompassing, right? Phase 1 was just about the identity of the NPC. Phase 2 was just about having a plot thread that it was romantic or sexual in it. And we just build bit by bit from there. And once a year we throw in just the rainbowiest, queerest, other words that probably aren't fit for PG-13 panels-est adventure, right? Because I just want to do that.
I mean, we could write that now. Let's do it.
Absolutely. I agree. I would from the ground up, from like the ground level, I think I would just make a setting that is a lot more representative the world as it is now, and then start removing those stigmas, start removing everything, racism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, all of it, because make it the default setting. And I borrow from the Star Trek School of Writing. Like, I'm fine with making allegories. So if you want to talk about a certain type of stigma, I can create an allegory story for that, just removing the actual horrible stuff, because they have not done that well over time. And yeah, I simply think, like, a lot of times, just so many of these games will be better if we scrapped the history, if we scrapped the attachment that people have to the absolute. I don't know the right word for saying, like, it must adhere to the. I feel like I'm getting, like, religious now, but, like, their absolute
Dogmatic.
attachment.
Low,
to, there it
once you
is.
came
There it
down
is.
with the tablets from the mountains.
Like, it's the dogma for them, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm just gonna take I'm gonna take scissors and cut this past, and just there it is. Okay, now everything, like, here's all your books. You've just learned. You're level 1. Make what you want and have fun.
Luke, how queer would you make it? How Scottish and queer would you make it?
I would love to make me an aggressively queer, but in such a manner it's very subtle.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I've been. Yes, tell me more. Ooh, I'm excited.
Like, that's not that. Like, just like, yeah, I have these queers everywhere as far as the eye can see, but it doesn't really. It doesn't, like, that's just it. Like, there's just queer people. That's simple as that. It's not a big deal. It just is what it is, and that's just what I do with it. Like, I don't want to make a big show dance, but just simply here. Like,
okay, but are all of those queer people also Scottish? Because then we should talk.
Yes.
Oh my God, we need to make this happen.
I could not unleash that on the world. I apologize.
We need to make this happen, though. We need to make some content.
I do. I need to know I need to know now what Scottish modifiers are on these characters that we're creating. Like, I would play one. I would not try to do the accent at all. No. I just want to know, like, okay, but what does being Scottish bring extra to my character? Because now I'm excited. Like,
oh, and if you're a queer Scot, what modifiers do you get? We should go stream and continue this conversation. I am 200% serious. Now we're just going to continue this conversation elsewhere, but now I really want to keep talking about this. All right, we have literally 5 minutes.
Right.
We have time for 1 or 2 questions. So, 1, a question ends with a question mark. 2, if you got to write out a whole backstory, I ain't reading it. I'm just telling you right now. And 2,
yeah, only have 5 minutes.
And 2 or 3, this is not a one-on-one conversation. We are not giving you permission. Don't ask us permission, or we will just give you all of our PayPal links. I have a mod sword. I can give you everyone's PayPal link right now if you try to get permission out of us. So start it with capital Q question, and then if there are no questions, then we can just chat for the 5 minutes we have left and plan out Luke's grand adventure.
Oh, that's a great title, though.
Oh, I do.
Yes.
Like that. Yeah.
I do like that. It's
so
like
I have guest star. Guest star. We could keep talking on my channel. All right.
Oh goodness.
All right. So I see no questions. You get a couple more minutes. Okay. Talika, what is your favorite story of a queer PC or NPC you played in a game? And there goes the 4 minutes. Everyone thinking.
Yeah.
No, I think one of the first queer characters I played, it wasn't that Vampire the Masquerade LARP, and it was a character that had been raised by one clan, but as a Malkavian. It was an actor who'd been turned as a Malkavian, but his sire actually told him that he was Toreador, and essentially ended up and it passed. Everybody was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And at that point ended up becoming like the leader of 2 clans, because like face changing between identities kind of thing. But yeah, that character was just over the top queer and delightful.
I love it. Eugenio or Luke?
I think mine's is probably gonna be a Mass Effect. or a Dragon Age. I love RPGs where I can just make this character, and like I do have a preference for mass presenting people, but that's essentially where that ends. And I think being able to essentially just really fall in love with the character rather than how they present is something really important. And I think the Dragon Age games really allow you to do that.
It's hard to pick one, but the one that stands out as just having had a really, like, I had a really good time playing them. There is I believe they are an elven shopkeeper in Waterdeep Dragon Heist for D&D. I do not remember their name, but they are, like their god Corlon Lorathian, they are a non-binary elf, and in their blurb, it says something about how if they are referred to as he or she, they politely say they prefer either their name, which I don't remember, or they, them. And I had, this is perhaps a bit perverse, but I had the best time escalating the corrections because I felt like I was able, like, this is a strange thing to say, but like, I felt very comfortable telling the cis folks at my table and escalating the intensity of telling them, no, this is incorrect. And I was happy to do it because I didn't feel like as a cis person, I had to take it on in a like heavy way. I could just yell at my cis friends for fucking up pronouns. Ooh, well, there's our one.
Dang it! You stole my one.
So I had a delightful time. I had a delightful time playing that character.
Other than Celise and Fen, what I call my default Hawk that romanced Fenris, because he's a terrible person. He just is. He's a very terrible person. And he actually spawned a whole bunch of fanfic because he had this whole journey of self-hate and hating being a mage. And imagine a self-hating mage and Fenris together. This was the worst relationship you could ever imagine. So that kind of discovery, both in the game and then beyond the game with the stories that I wrote with him, was probably my favorite. And also, surprising no one, I ship Lincoln and Donovan from from Mafia 3. Oh my God, I said Mass Effect. I saw the look of joy on your face.
I was like, oh, is there a new romance option I didn't know about?
Well, there goes 4 more months on your channel replaying Mass Effect. But we have 1 minute left, and in that time, everyone, thank you so much for joining me for the panel. Thank you to everyone watching for all the raids and great question that we got in. But unfortunately, we need to end. Our next panel is going to come up in about 15 minutes. But before we leave, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. Brian, who are you? What are you doing? And how are you celebrating on Tuesday?
Oh, right. Well, I'm Urban Bohemian everywhere. You can follow me on Twitter. That's the best way to know what's happening. I also stream on Twitch. I'm also on Rivals of Waterdeep. I'm also in a new Cyberpunk Independence podcast that's out. My birthday is on Tuesday. I am turning 50. I do not know, but I also know that I don't have enough champagne in my house.
Luke?
My name is LukeBoogie. You can find me everywhere on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the works. I stream Monday through Thursday, 1:30 UK time. And I had a lovely time. Thank you all so much for having me.
Eugenio.
Hi, everybody. I'm Eugenio. You can find me on Twitter and Twitch at DM JazzyHands. I stream on my channel Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 o'clock Eastern, 7 BST, 11 a.m. Pacific time. I also, on Monday nights, I'm over on twitch.tv/CNE Games, Codename Entertainment Games, playing a game of D&D where all of the player characters are little familiar creatures. And we're very bad at adventuring, but damn it, we try. Rivals will be coming back later next month, so look for that. We'll be back on Sundays. And I have a podcast. I have a D&D podcast. We are currently preparing for our 10th and final season of this campaign. So we've gone bi-weekly for a little while. But you can check out our interim episodes at DND Last Refuge. The show's called The Last Refuge, and we're hoping to start getting season 10 episodes out by the end of the year, and I refuse to put a date on it more than that. So there you go.
And I've been your, I almost said DM. Oh my God. I've been your mod. We've talked D&D a whole hour. That's where my brain went. Mod, DM, whatever. CypherofTyr, we're online, and I'm doing a whole lot of everything. I will be at TwitchCon. I'm doing a whole lot of everything. Just CypherofTyr. Follow me on the Twitters, what have you. But as we get ready to leave you, come back in 15 minutes, well now 14, for Fat Babes Kill God, making the first all-fat, all-queer 5e actual play with Death to Divinity. Thank you again to Developer Digital, to Saints Row, speaking of representation. Go play Saints Row, go play Cult of the Lamb. And then beyond the panel that is here and over at the main stage on Gaming Mag, go and check out gaming.live and follow Gaming Mag on all socials. Thanks for having us. Bye, y'all.